Hey guys, it's Wood here. The release of a new Smash game brings with it an influx of new players who might be unfamiliar with the competitive scene and its terminology. Well, we all start somewhere, so to better help those who are just now dipping their toes into the water of the competitive Smash pool, I will be releasing several guides that break down certain aspects into the most easily understandable way I can. Judging by the comments of my analysis videos, I think frame data is a good place to start. Just as a disclaimer, I will be using some Smash 4 data and footage in this video, since we know much more about it than Ultimate right now, but everything learned here will still apply. Alright, simply put, frame data are the numbers that make up the bare bones of your character. How fast does a certain move hit? How much damage does it do? How far does it launch your opponent, and how long do they have to hit you if you miss it? These are the things that frame data will tell you. So I'm going to use a simple move like Mario's forward smash to walk through the different aspects of frame data. Here is a frame data table from Kuragane Hammer covering Mario's forward smash. It's a pretty typical example of what you can expect from most frame data tables, and it covers most of the relevant elements of the move. At the top you can see sections for hitbox active, FAF or first actionable frame, base damage, launch angle, BKB or base knockback, and KBG or knockback growth. So let's walk through each of these sections separately and break them down into more detail. Since they are so interconnected, I recommend watching all the way through, but if you want to skip to any one in particular, just go to one of the timestamps listed here. The first cell we can see here is labeled hitbox active. This tells us the frame that the attack will start hitting the opponent. Looking at the chart, we can see that Mario's F smash first becomes active and starts hitting things on frame 15, and retains this ability until after frame 17. What does that mean exactly? Well, Smash moves at a rate of 60 frames per second. This means that 30 frames is half a second, 6 frames is a tenth of a second, and so on. Most moves are active anywhere from 1 to 4 frames typically, meaning you'll need to be relatively precise to land them. But other moves, like Cloud Downer for example, are active for much longer, meaning it stays out longer, is easier to hit, and covers an area more effectively. When you hear someone say that a move is very active, this is what they mean. But what about the other 14 frames before it becomes active? Well, this is called startup lag, or startup for short. These are the dead frames, where your character is stuck in the animation of the attack, but the attack isn't hitting anything yet. The more startup lag you have on a move, the more open you are before you land it. Generally speaking, anything that becomes active in under 10 frames is pretty fast, and anything with more than about 17 frames of startup starts to become slow enough that your opponent can react to it, and you will need a bigger prediction to land your mark. But there's more to a move's lag than just its startup, which brings us to the next section, FAF. FAF, or first actionable frame, is basically a measure for the total amount of time a move takes to complete from start to finish. In our Mario F Smash example, the move has an FAF of 48 frames. This means when you input the move and start at frame 1, you won't be able to do anything else until 47 frames later on frame 48. This is what players mean when they talk about commitment. When you throw out Mario's F Smash, you cannot do anything else, and thus commit to that F Smash until you reach 48 frames, more than 3/4 of a second. Knowing the FAF of a move gives you an idea of how punishable it will be if it whiffs. If the Mario is stuck doing the forward smash and you know it will miss, you know you have about 48 frames to punish them for it. But not all punishes are whiff punishes. Some hit shield, which brings us to end lag. In the same way that startup lag is the amount of dead frames before an attack becomes active and starts hitting, end lag is the dead frames that occur after the attack stops hitting, but before you can do anything else. Mario's last frame of activity on his F Smash is 17. This is the last frame it can possibly hit something, and the FAF is 48. This means that the lowest possible end lag for Mario's F Smash is 31 frames. This will mainly come into play with punishes out of shield. Since the opponent's shield is actually hit by the attack, their punish window is restricted to the end lag after the hit. Smash moves are generally balanced in this way. Some moves have quick startup and high end lag, making them great for punishes but dangerous when missed. Others have slow startup and little end lag, requiring one to think a bit further ahead to land a hit, but not being nearly as cruel to the user when used on shield for instance. Aerials are actually a little special in this area because while they still have the same startup, end lag, and FAF as grounded attacks, they also have landing lag. Landing lag occurs when you hit the floor while still performing the aerial. Your character will be stuck on the ground for a bit before they can act again. However, there is a way to get around this landing lag, and it's called autocanceling. Every aerial has what's called an autocancel window, meaning even though you may still not have passed the move's FAF and not be able to act in the air again, if you hit the ground after the auto cancel window, your character will land without any lag, as if they never used an attack at all. I'll use Diddy's forward air as an example. Normally, if you use this move while landing, Diddy will suffer a large amount of landing lag and leave himself open. However, if you use it immediately after jumping, so that Diddy is in the air performing the attack for longer than the required auto cancel window, he will then land with almost no lag at all, transforming it from what would otherwise be a fairly mediocre move into one of the best pressure tools in the game. The same can be said about Pikachu, who has some pretty bad landing lag on some of its aerials, but has such generous auto cancel windows that it really doesn't matter. On the opposite side is K. Rool, who has some of the worst FAF and auto cancel windows in the game on his aerials, but decent landing lag for the damage he does. Meaning you can really only get one aerial out per jump, and the game rewards you for quickly landing with your aerials as opposed to doing them while rising or high in the air. Some moves can auto cancel quick enough to be done with just a short hop, while others require a higher full hop. Moves that auto cancel and short hop are generally preferred due to their speed, safety, and flexibility. Now the speed and lagginess of an attack are crucial, but so is what happens when you actually land it, and the rest of the sections in this table cover just that. So let's get started. The first section you will see that pertains to how the attack behaves when you land it is its base damage. This is the damage value that is hard coded into the game and is where damage starts before all other multipliers and modifiers are applied. You'll notice that Mario's F Smash has two separate values listed for its base damage, and that is because it has two separate hitboxes, each doing different damages. The stronger of the two at the end of the palm is called the sweet spot, while the weaker one on the arm is called a sour spot. Marth's tipper hits are probably the most famous example of sweet spots in Smash, second only to maybe Falcon's knee. In Smash Ultimate, base damage can be affected by a lot of things, like the 20% increase for items off one-on-one, the 15% reduction in damage for short hop aerials, and of course, move staling. Now the stale move mechanic is deep enough to make a whole video on in itself, but I will run through the basics. Essentially, there is a queue of 9 slots that fill up with different moves you hit, including on shield. The more slots a single move occupies in this queue, the weaker it becomes, for up to a 53% reduction in damage. But if you land an attack that isn't in the stale queue yet at all, you will actually gain a 5% bonus in damage, so this encourages mixing things up. Other character-specific modifiers like Deep Breathing, Aura, and Monado Arts exist, with some affecting knockback as well as damage, but the point is that base damage is where it all starts. Next up is Launch Angle, and this is pretty self-explanatory. This shows the angle in which your opponent will fly once hit by the move. 0 degrees is flat horizontally away from you, 90 degrees is straight up, 180 degrees is directly behind you, and 270 degrees is straight down, which is usually reserved for spikes. Now you may be wondering what 361 degrees means, and that is the special code for what is known as the Sac Right Angle. Basically, this angle has been used for many years in many Smash games, and in Ultimate it means that low knockback, the opponent will be sent at 0 degrees, and at high knockback, they will either be sent at 38 degrees if on the ground, or at 45 degrees if in the air. It's a very common angle that a lot of stronger moves have. Now the value stated in the datasheet is only the base angle, but if you're hit with a move you can affect your launch trajectory with DI, or Directional Influence. This mechanic allows you to take the angle a move sends you at and modify it a bit by holding the analog stick in a certain direction. For instance, if a move sends at 45 degrees, you can hold it up to be launched higher and down to be launched further out. DI is, again, another extremely deep mechanic that warrants its own video, but for the sake of this video, just know that you want to DI in a way that you have further to fly before you reach the blast zone, and thus live longer. Alright, to wrap this up we have the knockback stats. These are what get applied to the damage in the knockback formula and spit out a value that shows how far a character will be launched by an attack. The formula is pretty complicated, but to simplify it down, the higher the damage in knockback, the more powerful the move is. The more damage a move does, the less knockback points it needs to kill, and vice versa. Meaning high damage moves like 9-Hammer for example, have lower knockback stats than say Finishing Touch, which only does 1%, but still kills very early. Now you may be wondering why they are split up into 2 sections. This is because Smash uses something called Base Knockback and Knockback Growth. Base Knockback is the ground floor. It is what determines how far a move will launch basically at 0%. Knockback growth is what determines how hard the knockback will scale with the opponent's percent. The higher this stat is, the more severe the launch rate will increase as the opponent's percent increases. For example, Ryu's back air had 0 base knockback, at least in Smash 4, but has a decent knockback growth stat of 90, scaling to its high 16% base damage. This seems to be a similar case for Ultimate. This means at 0% it doesn't even make the opponent fall over, but just a bit more damage and suddenly they start flying. Some smash attacks, for instance, have such low base knockback they aren't even safe on hit at low percents, but still have the knockback growth to be potent kill options later on. On the opposite side, a move like Game & Watch's up throw has extremely high base knockback, but almost no knockback growth, meaning it launches nearly the same distance no matter what the opponent's percent. Now knockback, just like base damage, can be affected by various things, some of which like deep breathing and Monado arts I mentioned before, but the main one that affects every character is Rage. Rage is a mechanic that increases both your base knockback and knockback growth the higher damage you have. It starts building once you reach 35% and grows until you hit 150, where it will max out at a 10% knockback increase. This is toned down quite a bit from the 15% boost that Smash 4 had and exploited, but it's still enough to reduce the kill percent of certain moves by quite a bit. And with that, you now know the basics of Smash Bros. Frame data. Obviously there are still other factors like invincibility and intangibility properties on moves, super armor, and other things you might see on a frame data sheet, but if you watched all the way through this video, you should at least be able to see how exactly a move behaves by looking at its data. Thanks for watching, guys. I know from experience that diving into a competitive scene can seem daunting at first, and no one wants to look like they aren't knowledgeable. But everyone starts somewhere, and hopefully I helped you all get your footing. I wanted this community to stay big and grow even bigger, so I will try my best to alleviate any barriers to entry I can through these guides. If you would like to support the channel monetarily, I suggest popping by our Patreon to get some cool rewards for your generosity. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.